Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. Group breakups or splits have been there as long as the very existence of bands themselves, and reggae bands are definitely not immune to this phenomenon, with notable examples like the Wailers, Toots and the Maytals, Black Uhuru, and the very subject of today's video in the legendary Aswad. Coming straight out of Ladbroke Grove in London, this sensational posse practically invented the UK reggae scene in their own Rastafarian image, combining sizzling roots reggae instrumentals with hard-hitting lyrics and commentary about spirituality, as well as social messaging about Britain in the 1970s from a young immigrant's point of view. These trailblazers set the standard for others coming after them like Steel Pulse, Misty in Roots, and Black Slate, establishing British reggae as a sound at par with the very best of what was coming from Jamaica. They were indeed the first British reggae group to bag a deal with an international record label when Island Records signed them in 1976. They were the poster boys of musical brotherhood over the years, but in a shocking twist, that group's mastermind and founder, Brinsley Forde, quit the band almost exactly 21 years after forming it, for vague reasons that left fans and media speculating wildly over what the cause might have been. And if you Google it or check Wikipedia, it says Brinsley Forde left that group for spiritual reasons, though in recent interviews he's come out plainly to say he never said that. But after a deep dive into the Aswad rabbit hole, it becomes clearer that there is indeed some truth in that statement. And it came to light that a number of factors, including creative differences, spiritual convictions, and for sure the cutthroat nature of the music business, all contributed to his decision to leave the band. Let's take a look at the real reason why Brinsley Forde left Aswad. Now, as said earlier, the group was indeed his brainchild and creation. After what was a successful career as a child actor, he ran into the Wailers in London while they were on tour with Johnny Nash in 1972 and practically moved in with them, picking up valuable musical lessons in the process. They inspired him to go into music, and he would over time decide to start his own band. He put up posters all over his neighborhood, inviting interested instrumentalists to call his parents' home phone. This invitation led to the addition of bassist George Oban, keyboardist Courtney Hemmings, guitarist Donald Griffiths, and a 16-year-old ace drummer named Angus Gay in 1975. In the very peak era of roots reggae, they were as fundamental and radical as they come. They named themselves Aswad, the Arabic word for black, and after recording a few songs for a demo, they marched into Island Records' office uninvited, like they owned the place, and walked out with a record deal in 1976. The debut album, also named Aswad, was a critical smash that was soon followed by Hewlett in 1979 that was also a brilliant work of art with some of my very favorite Aswad tracks. But despite putting out incredible music that was earning respect even from their counterparts in Jamaica, their music wasn't doing so well commercially, and over time they would lose 3 original members and brought in bassist Tony Robinson to replace founding member George Oban. They would go into the 80s as a trio, and though they were popular, still hadn't scored a major hit in the charts yet. A fact made even more dire by the fact that roots reggae suffered a decline in popularity with the rise of dancehall. They would experiment with different sounds and genres on projects like Rebel Souls, but largely stayed true to their core sound. However, that would change in 1987 when they signed for Island Records for a second time, exactly 10 years since they had parted ways with the label, and unleashed their album Distant Thunder in 1988. This album spawned their biggest hit yet in Don't Turn Around, that went to #1 in England and truly became a global smash. This lovers rock inclined tune was a cover of a Tina Turner song with Jomi Zeb as charming as ever on lead vocals. This song truly launched the band's commercial viability, but more significantly also marked the era of Jomi Zeb on lead vocals. The group had always had more than one person singing on lead, but if you analyze critically, you find that between 1976 and 1986, which I call the Brinsley Forde era, he took lead on majority of the songs, with Jomi Zeb doing his thing on only a few cuts like Roots Rocking. That period was undoubtedly the roots radical epoch, but Distant Thunder and its incredible success would usher in a phase of pop-inclined lovers rock that was by then literally a commercial goldmine that the record label would embrace big time, and Jomi Zeb was the perfect outlet for this new direction. Long-time followers of that group would definitely have noticed that after Don't Turn Around, Jomi would emerge as the frontman and Brinsley Forde a bit more reserved than usual. I can't say for a fact if the record label influenced this dynamic, but to all eyes present, it became the status quo. This reggae pop lovers rock crossover sound went to a whole new level with the release of their next album, Too Wicked, in 1990. Recorded at producer Gussie Clarke's Music Works studio in Kingston, it was simply bursting with love songs which were radio friendly and totally in line with the prevailing tunes of that time, but totally unrecognizable from Aswad's early works and traditional sound. It became a minor commercial hit and received very harsh reviews from critics and their old fans for being a crossover that had gone too far. If there were any differences, whether creative or personal, between Brinsley Forde, Drummy and Tony, no one said a word, but if you check his body language in this footage from 1990, it speaks volumes. This interview by Jamaican media company Reggae Strong TV was done during the making of the Too Wicked album, and it's clear as day, at least to my eyes, that Brinsley here is very detached and looks bored, with his two bandmates more engaged, energetic and chatty. But despite the poor results of that album in the charts, the band will stick to this new formula, and it's paid off again when their next album, Rise and Shine, became a global hit that breached the top 10 of the US and UK reggae charts, spawned the hit track Shine, and earned that group their first reggae nomination in 1995. The song Shine was a typical 1990s dancehall banger with inspirational lyrics belted out masterfully by Brinsley Forde on lead vocals. Personally, I find the whole album to be a decent compilation, and while not as radical as the early material, light years away from Too Wicked. But whatever the case, Brinsley Forde was done, unable to continue on the path Aswad had taken to ensure commercial success. He quit that group a year later. He left music for a while, took a hiatus from the limelight, and moved far away to the Canary Islands, where he would play in a small band with an old friend of his for a few years. And after he left, Drummy and Tony continued Aswad as a duo, while Brinsley would go back to acting and did some work as a DJ on the BBC radio reggae show Dub Bashment. And despite endless questions from the media, he would maintain over time that there was no friction or bad blood between him and his ex-bandmates. But he did reveal in several interviews that he had for years struggled to maintain a balance between his artistic inspirations and the business side of music, and that he was eventually forced to decide who he wanted to be and what he wanted to do. And he will show exactly who he was when he released his first solo album named Urban Jungle in 2013, a sizzling body of music loaded with quality reggae tunes, a conscious project that could easily pass for an Aswad album from the 70s. But through it all, I can't stress enough how classy he and his ex-bandmates were over the whole issue, as they maintained a wonderful relationship after it. And when Forde was invited by Island Records to perform at the label's 50th anniversary celebrations, he invited Tony and Drummy to reunite as Aswad for a show. And very contrary to what Island Records, naysayers and rumor mills predicted, it was all love, both on stage and off stage, between the guys. So while creative differences and the commercial side of music forced Brinsley Forde to quit Aswad, I'm really glad that it became one of the most peaceful breakups in music history. Just a wonderful example of an artist realizing that it's time to choose a new path for himself and stay true to what took him into music in the very first place. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.